I straightened my blazer, took a breath so deep it seemed to pull from 6 years ago, and signed the acquisition papers for my 5th Childcare center. Congratulations, Ms. Mitchell. The broker smiled, offering her hand. Bright Art Learning Centers continues to impress. Her words felt surreal. But as I shook her hand, all I could hear was my mother's voice on my 26th birthday. "You're just a nanny, Sarah, a glorified babysitter." It had come between dessert and the check casually, as though she were commenting on the weather. 6 years later, I stood outside that office as the proud owner of a 2 million early childhood education empire, and that same woman had just emailed me about the receptionist position at my flagship location. The irony didn't escape me, but neither did the wound. Growing up in Boston, I wasn't the kind of kid who dreamed of space shuttles or courtroom drama. My childhood bedroom wasn't filled with posters of pop stars or politicians. No, mine was wallpapered with laminated photos of teachers cut from old magazines. I used to arrange my stuffed animals into neat rows and teach them lessons on a small chalkboard my grandmother Eleanor gave me for my 5th birthday. Other kids played house. I played school. By age 12, I was the go-to babysitter in our neighborhood. Affluent parents booked me weeks in advance. I had a natural way with children, one that even other adults commented on. Everyone saw it except my own parents. In the Mitchell household, success had a strict definition. Harvard law degrees, like my mother Caroline. Cardiac surgery residencies, like my father Thomas. 6-figure salaries. Prestigious cocktail party banter. Anything outside that was a curiosity at best, a failure at worst. I still remember career day in 5th grade. I'd spent the whole weekend cutting out pictures of smiling teachers and happy children for my poster. When it was my turn, I told everyone that I wanted to open a school one day. Some parents clapped politely, others nodded. My mother just gave a tight-lipped smile and shook her head. In the car, she said, "Teaching is sweet, Sarah. But with your intelligence, you could be a pediatrician, still helping children but making a real difference." That was the first hairline fracture. It wouldn't be the last. From middle school onward, brochures for pre-med and pre-law programs began appearing mysteriously on my desk. Over dinner, my father would mention his connections at top medical schools. My mother arranged coffee dates with daughters of her legal colleagues. "Just for perspective," she said. It was subtle but persistent. A quiet campaign to reroute my life. The only person who ever seemed to understand was Grandma Eleanor. She'd pat my hand with her wrinkled fingers and say, "Not everyone's meant to follow a path, Sarah. Some people are meant to make new ones." When college decision time came, I dropped the bomb over celebratory steak. I've accepted a scholarship to Boston University's early childhood education program. Silence. My mother set her wineglass down hard enough to splash red on the white tablecloth. "We assumed you'd pick Northwestern pre-law, or at least business." My father's tone was cooler. "We'll support whatever you choose." But his eyes said otherwise. They paid for tuition, but approval, that would never be part of the deal. BU felt like the first space where I truly belonged. In those classrooms surrounded by professors who celebrated my curiosity and classmates who dreamed like I did, I began crafting the seeds of what would later become Bright Art. I found my tribe in Jessica Kim, whose Korean immigrant parents also had inflexible expectations, and Marcus Reed, a finance major turned education advocate. We spent late nights huddled over coffee, whispering about how we would revolutionize childcare. Our dreams weren't pipe dreams. They were plans. By junior year, I'd won an award for innovative curriculum design. I called my parents 3 weeks in advance, practically begging them to come to the ceremony. "It's the same night as your father's hospital fundraiser," my mother replied with a sigh. "You know we can't miss that. Could you come for just part of it?" I asked hope, straining in my voice. "Sarah, be reasonable." They never showed. The chairs I'd reserved sat empty under the warm glow of stage lights. Jessica's parents had driven 3 hours to be there. They beamed with pride when she took the mic. The contrast was unbearable. That summer, I interned at Glenwood Academy, one of Boston's most prestigious preschools. The director, Mrs. Bennett, saw what my family never could. You have an instinct for this. That can't be taught. It was there I met Professor Diana Williams, a national voice in early childhood development. She became my mentor. She called my emotional cognitive blend of curriculum fascinating and pushed me to design my own approach, what would eventually become Bright Art's signature whole child, whole future. But even at graduation, my parents only attended because, well, what would people say if they didn't? "You can always get an MBA later," my mother said with a stiff hug. "The business world will welcome someone like you." My father added, "That night I stared at my diploma and felt hollow. For the first time, I wondered, had I made a mistake that night alone in my apartment? I sat cross-legged on my bed with my diploma beside me and every voice of doubt echoing through my mind. You're wasting your potential. It's just babysitting. You can always get a real job later. For a split second, I considered giving up. But then I opened the portfolio I'd built over the past 4 years, page after page of lesson plans, classroom layouts, case studies, developmental theories paired with real-life applications. There was intention in every detail, purpose behind every crayon box and block corner. This wasn't fantasy, it was a framework, and children needed this desperately. So I made a promise to myself, if the world didn't already see the value in early education, I'd make them see it. Glenwood Academy offered me a lead teacher position immediately after graduation, an unheard-of opportunity for someone just out of college. I threw myself into it with everything I had. Within months, my classroom became the one everyone requested. Parents left notes in their children's backpacks hoping to transfer into Ms. Sarah's class. Children once considered difficult flourished in my space. I designed stations that looked like play but developed fine motor skills, social reasoning, and emotional regulation all at once. The room buzzed with purpose, and yet at home, nothing had changed. At my father's celebratory dinner for being named chair of cardiac surgery, my mother interrupted my explanation about a curriculum redesign with a laugh. "Sarah's still at that preschool," she said to the table. "Finger paints and tantrums. $22 an hour, and she insists it's her calling." The table shifted uncomfortably. I tried to respond, tried to explain the impact I was making, but she raised a glass to my cousin's law school acceptance before I could finish. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my own reflection. My lipstick hadn't smudged, but my pride had cracked. I began sharing less and less with my family, until one day a little boy named Jake changed everything. Jake was 4. His parents, both accomplished scientists, enrolled him at Glenwood as a last resort. He'd already been dismissed from 2 other preschools for behavioral issues. The intake notes were littered with phrases like disruptive, non-compliant, and delayed. But when I met Jake, I didn't see a problem child. I saw a child in pain. He struggled with transitions. Meltdowns were frequent. He avoided eye contact and rarely interacted with peers. But beneath the surface, I recognized something deeper. A brilliant, overwhelmed little boy whose environment simply didn't make sense to him. I changed everything. I restructured the classroom flow to give him advanced warnings before transitions, created a quiet corner with calming textures and noise-reducing headphones, built social scripts he could use to navigate playtime. Every small breakthrough felt like a mountain moved. By week 3, Jake smiled during story time. By week 5, he asked another child if they wanted to build with blocks. By week 8, he was leading group play. His mother cried during our parent-teacher conference. "This is the first time someone has seen our son for who he really is. You've changed our family." And then something extraordinary happened. Jake's father, a renowned physicist, requested a meeting with the Glenwood board to personally commend my work. His endorsement elevated my credibility in a way even my degree couldn't. The board asked me to begin consulting on behavior intervention strategies for the entire school. Suddenly, people started listening to what I'd been saying for years. Meanwhile, I kept my distance from my parents until my 26th birthday. That night would change everything. My mother insisted on dinner at Calav, an upscale Italian restaurant where she hosted clients. "Nonsense," she said when I suggested something casual. 26 is a milestone. I arrived in a navy blue dress I'd splurged on new, hopeful, naive. For once, things started smoothly. Wine flowed, conversation stayed light. When my father asked about work, I beamed. Actually, big news. Mrs. Bennett is retiring, and the board asked me to consider stepping in as director next year. I'd be the youngest in Glenwood's history. I expected a smile, a cheer, maybe even a toast. Instead, my mother set down her fork. "Oh, Sarah, is that really what you want? You're just a nanny, a glorified babysitter." The words slapped the air out of me. My father looked down at his wine, silent as ever. My hands trembled in my lap. "You don't understand what I do," I said, voice shaking. "I'm shaping young minds during their most formative years. It's intellectually demanding. It matters." She reached across the table, patting my hand like a child's. "Of course it feels meaningful to you, sweetheart. But from the outside, it's blocks and boogers. You could be doing so much more." Something snapped. Years of swallowing pride, of seeking approval, of hoping for understanding. I stood up. "Thank you for dinner," I said, voice cold. "I need to go." I walked out into the rain, didn't wait for the valet. Walked 6 blocks in heels until I could breathe again. Soaked to the bone, I called the one person who had never made me doubt myself. Grandma. Did I make a mistake? She didn't hesitate. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell listened to me. Some people are called to argue in courtrooms, some are called to stitch hearts back together, and some, like you, are called to shape futures. What could possibly be more important than that? We spoke for hours. That night, sleep never came. I stayed up until dawn researching childcare trends, business models, market gaps. The need for quality programs was massive. Most daycares focused on safety. Preschools obsessed over academics. No one prioritized emotional intelligence, whole child development, or future-ready skills. And in that sleepless sunrise moment, I made 2 decisions. I would stop seeking my parents' approval. I would build something so extraordinary that even they couldn't ignore it. The morning after that rain-soaked dinner, I opened my laptop and stared at the blinking cursor on a blank Word document. Bright Art Learning Center Business Plan Draft. It didn't matter that I had no business background. I had a vision, one rooted in years of classroom experience research and unshakable conviction. And if no one else would believe in it, I would believe enough for everyone. By day, I remained the lead teacher at Glenwood, but by night, I transformed into a startup founder. My cozy apartment became a command center. Vision boards covered my walls. Curriculum outlines and business books towered on the coffee table. I took evening classes through BU's extension program to learn marketing, finance, and small business law. The more I learned, the clearer the opportunity became. Where most daycares offered basic supervision and preschools pushed early academics at the cost of emotional health, Bright Art would do both and more. My whole child, whole future model would weave academic readiness, emotional intelligence, and social development into every moment of the day. Parents weren't just desperate for quality childcare, they were desperate for something better. But there was one problem: money. My savings, even with careful budgeting, wouldn't last more than 2 months. So I made sacrifices, moved into a tiny apartment in a less desirable part of town, took weekend consulting gigs helping parents manage behavioral challenges. I opened a separate savings account labeled Bright Art Seed Fund, and every spare dollar went in. When I finally hit $20,000, just enough for a short lease and bare bones materials, I approached the banks. 6 rejections in a row. Interesting concept, one loan officer told me, but childcare has slim margins. You're too high risk without collateral. Another said flatly, "You've never run a lemonade stand and now you want to launch an education startup," with every no. I felt the weight of every past dismissal rise back up. And so, with deep reluctance and dread in my stomach, I approached my parents. I spent weeks perfecting my pitch, market analysis, projections, methodology. I practiced in the mirror in the car, even in my sleep. We met in their polished living room on a Sunday afternoon. I laid out my proposal: not charity. An investment opportunity? A growing market, a sustainable model, a mission-driven company with massive demand. When I finished, my father folded his arms and stared at me. "You want us to give you thousands of dollars and to open a daycare." My mother let out a short laugh. "You're still chasing this fantasy Sarah childcare businesses fail all the time. What happens when it collapses? You'll expect us to bail you out, I won't," I said firmly. "I'm asking you to believe in me now, not rescue me later. If you want to go into business," my father added coldly, "get an MBA, work at a firm, then maybe." "You'll fail," my mother finished, "like all your other childish dreams." Their words stung more than the bank rejections. I packed up my presentation materials with shaking hands and drove home heartbroken. For 3 days, I questioned everything. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being naive. It was Professor Williams who snapped me out of it. She noticed my silence during our weekly coffee meeting and gently asked what was wrong. I told her everything: my plan, the rejections, the humiliation. She listened quietly, then leaned forward. "Sarah, I've been waiting for someone like you to revolutionize childcare. Your model deserves to exist." Then she paused. "Have you heard of Abigail Henderson?" The name rang a bell. A former BU student turned tech mogul who now invested in education startups. She might want to hear what you're building. 2 weeks later, I sat across from Abigail in her sleek Boston Harbor office. She wore silver heels and a sharp expression. For 3 hours, she grilled me on every detail, every number, every choice. I didn't flinch. At the end, she stood up, extended her hand, and said $200 for 25% equity, performance-based adjustments. You've got the vision. Let's see if you can build the system. I blinked. "You're investing." "Not in childcare," she said. "In you, in your belief that kids deserve more and that the world needs to catch up." That handshake changed everything. No longer was I just Sarah, the idealistic teacher. I was now Sarah Mitchell, founder and CEO. Next came the most urgent decision of all: location. I spent 2 months touring commercial spaces. Most were sterile offices or dark basements, nowhere near the vibrant, light-filled environment I envisioned. Then I found it. A Victorian house in Cambridge previously used as a law office. Big windows, a fenced yard, multiple rooms. It was perfect except for the price and the zoning. I didn't flinch. I filed for a variance, created a community impact statement, attended zoning board meetings. I spent nights writing impassioned letters to neighbors explaining the value of high-quality childcare. After 6 weeks, I got the approval. Abigail helped structure a lease-to-own deal that protected Bright Art in case of early failure. Now I needed a team. Jessica Kim joined immediately as curriculum director. But hiring teachers who understood my integrated model proved difficult. Most were trained in either rigid academics or free-play philosophies, not both. After dozens of interviews, I found a small crew willing to train under my philosophy. Then came renovations. The Victorian's charm masked its age. We needed safety rails, extra bathrooms, fire alarms, accessibility ramps. The costs ballooned. Contractors made mistakes. I cried in the parking lot more than once. 2 weeks before opening the fire, Marshall demanded additional changes. Abigail provided extra funding reluctantly. Opening day arrived with only 6 children enrolled out of 20 possible. I stood at the door in a navy blouse and trembling hands, smiling as if my heart wasn't pounding. Would parents believe in us? Would the model hold up behind closed doors? Rival centers whispered we were too experimental. Others claimed we were not structured enough. I worked 16-hour days teaching cleaning, emailing marketing. I lost 12 pounds, developed migraines. My custodian quit unexpectedly, and I mopped bathroom floors on my hands and knees. Then came the email from my mother. "I drove by your center. That empty parking lot doesn't bode well. When you're ready to accept reality, I'll help with your resume. Law firms always need paralegals. At least that's education adjacent." I printed it, tacked it to my office corkboard, not as motivation, as a reminder: never build for someone else's approval. That night alone in the preschool room, I cried. For the first time since starting Bright Art, I let it out. Then something caught my eye, a child's painting. It was from Oliver, a 4-year-old with sensory processing challenges, who had never drawn other people. But there, in bright red crayon, was a smiling stick figure, labeled Ms. Sarah, surrounded by other children. His mother had told me, "This is the first time he's drawn himself not alone." And just like that, I remembered, even if we only helped 6 kids, it would be worth it. The day after I hung Oliver's drawing on my corkboard, I made a decision. I wouldn't waste another second chasing the approval of people who couldn't even see what was right in front of them. Instead, I'd focus on the ones who could, the children, the parents, the people searching for exactly what Bright Art offered. I rewrote our marketing materials to emphasize what made us different, a developmentally integrated model for children with diverse learning needs. I cold-called pediatricians, emailed therapists, offered open house tours to specialists who worked with kids on the spectrum or with processing disorders. One therapist forwarded my brochure to a family she'd worked with for years. They enrolled within a week, then another, and another. By the end of month 3, our enrollment had doubled. By month 6, we had a waiting list. Parents started calling us the place where kids finally belong. It wasn't just word of mouth, it was word of transformation. Parents told stories of children who stopped dreading school, who started expressing emotions, who made friends for the first time. One mother broke down in tears because her son had learned how to tell her for the first time when he was scared. That was the power of our model, and people were beginning to notice. On Bright Art's first anniversary, the Boston Herald published a feature titled "Rethinking Childcare: How One Cambridge Center is Blending Learning with Emotional Development." The article included interviews with satisfied parent specialists and even an education professor from BU who praised our integrated curriculum. Enrollment surged. Investors reached out. One wanted to franchise immediately. I declined. I wasn't ready to scale too fast and risk compromising quality, but I was ready to expand. An aging daycare in Brooklyn approached us. The owner was retiring. The location was perfect, affluent young professionals and a community hungry for better options. With Abigail Henderson's help, we acquired it, renovated, retrained staff, and launched Bright Art Brooklyn. And just like that, Bright Art became a multi-location organization. I couldn't do it alone, so I hired Marcus, my old friend from BU, as director of operations. His business mindset paired perfectly with my educational vision. Together, we built systems, documentation, training programs, repeatable models. Our centers weren't just surviving, they were thriving. TEDx invited me to speak. My talk, "The Future of Early Childhood," isn't academic, it's emotional, gained over 70,000 views. National early childhood organizations reached out. One honored Bright Art with an Innovation in Education Award. And with our first significant profit margin, I kept a promise I'd whispered into the phone during one of those tearful late nights. I bought my grandmother, Eleanor, a cozy condo near the Charles River. I always knew, she whispered as I handed her the keys, "The world just needed time to catch up to you." Over the next 18 months, we launched Bright Art Newton, then Bright Art Somerville. Each followed the same model: strategic renovation, intensive teacher training, and a focus on intentional design, light space, and sensory harmony. By the time Bright Art reached 5 locations, we had over 100 children, enrolled 70 employees, and a valuation nearing $2 million. And that's when the Boston Business Journal came calling. They ran a headline that stopped me in my tracks: from glorified babysitter to industry disruptor, how Sarah Mitchell is transforming childcare. I didn't know my mother subscribed to the Journal, but a week later my assistant buzzed my office. "Your mother's here. No appointment." I froze. She walked in with her usual elegance. Power suit. Perfect posture. Her eyes scanned the room, framed awards, kids, artwork, business plans on my whiteboard. "Nice office," she said, as if commenting on a rental unit. "Very colorful." I stayed behind my desk. Calm. Guarded. "This is a surprise. Is everything okay with Dad?" "He's fine," she said. I'm here about a professional matter. She sat without invitation, smoothing invisible creases on her lap. Your company is growing rapidly, and given the regulatory complexity in childcare, I believe I could be of value perhaps as general counsel or chief operating officer. I blinked. Surely I misheard. The woman who once mocked my vision as glorified babysitting was now requesting an executive role in the very company I built. With her dismissal ringing in my ears, I opened my mouth, but she spoke first. I've always supported your potential, Sarah. I simply wanted you to aim higher, and you did. You built something impressive. I'm ready to help take it to the next level. The revisionist history nearly took my breath away. You laughed in my face when I first pitched this, I said quietly. You told me I'd fail. Families disagree, she shrugged. What matters is that I'm here now with 25 years of legal experience. That's when it clicked. You lost your partnership, I guessed. You were let go. Her face hardened. Budget cuts, restructuring. Doesn't matter. I've told several colleagues I'll be joining your executive team. It would be embarrassing to walk that back. Her voice dropped. Besides, I'd hate for the press to learn that the self-made founder of this education company actually comes from privileged private schools, family money. It could complicate your image. There it was, the veiled threat. Are you threatening me? I asked. She leaned back. I'm suggesting that family supports family, especially when reputations are on the line, mine and yours. When she left, I had a full-blown panic attack. Collapsed on my office floor, gasping, I questioned everything. Had I come this far just to be manipulated back into silence, I brought it to my therapist, Dr. Levin, the next day. She didn't hesitate. Sarah, this is emotional manipulation at a higher level, because now you've built something she wants. It's not collaboration, it's extraction. Her words snapped me into focus. I had spent years trying to prove my value to a woman who could only recognize it once it benefited her. And now that I had finally built something real, she wanted to reframe the narrative as if she'd been a supporter all along. Not this time. I didn't respond to my mother's surprise visit right away. Instead, I invited her to our flagship Cambridge Center the following Saturday, not to my office, but into the heart of Bright Art. No children would be present. I wanted her to walk through our spaces without distraction to see with her own eyes the intentional design she'd always dismissed. She arrived at 10 a.m., sharp, dressed like she was heading to Court Heel's power suit, and that same air of entitlement I remembered from childhood. Thanks for coming, I said coolly. Let me show you what we actually do. Her smile was polite, unreadable. She still thought this was a formality before I'd hand her a title. But as I walked her through the classrooms, I explained the purpose behind everything. The curved architecture of reading nooks designed to create intimacy while maintaining visibility. Art stations that fostered independence and peer collaboration. Window placement that synced with children's daily rhythm, enhancing light and focus. Documentation systems tracking individual developmental growth across cognitive, social, and emotional domains. As we toured, I noticed her eyes scanning the environment, not in judgment this time, but in curiosity. I kept my tone calm, my explanations detailed. I wanted her to know this wasn't decoration or glorified babysitting. It was pedagogy, science, thought leadership. When we paused in the science exploration room, I turned to face her directly. Mom, I know losing your position at the firm was painful. I understand feeling unmoored. I really do. She opened her mouth, but I continued. But I need to be absolutely clear. Bright Art was built on a foundation of respect for children, for parents, for educators. That includes requiring everyone in leadership to understand our mission from the ground up. Her expression tightened. I understand your mission. I'm offering legal expertise and operations strategy skills you need as you expand. But you don't understand what we do, I said calmly. You've never seen it up close. You've never worked within it. You've only ever mocked it. Her voice rose just slightly. That's not fair. I pushed you because I believed in your potential. No, I cut in, still composed. You pushed me because you couldn't imagine success looking any different than your own. I pulled out a printed sheet and handed it to her. This is a formal job description. Front desk receptionist, Wellesley location. She stared at the paper as though it were written in another language. A receptionist, she repeated slowly. Correct. You'd learn our systems? Understand our parent communication process? See how we function from the ground up? If after 6 months you're still interested and if you demonstrate alignment with our values, then we can discuss something more. Her face flushed. A cocktail of rage, humiliation, and disbelief. I could see how much it hurt her ego, but also how much she knew I wasn't backing down. I'm an attorney with 25 years of experience, she said stiffly. And not a single hour in early education, I replied. Everyone who holds leadership here has earned it by embracing the mission. That includes me. For a moment, I thought she'd walk out. Instead, she folded the paper and nodded once curtly. Fine, I'll consider it. 3 weeks later, my mother began working part-time as our Wellesley front desk receptionist. Her transition was rocky. She struggled with the lack of prestige, the slower pace, the emotional labor. She bristled at being told how to interact with families and staff. She referred to our teachers as girls until Jessica corrected her gently but firmly. And yet, something began to shift. She started seeing the tears in parents' eyes when their child learned to self-regulate, the way our staff planned conflict resolution lessons into story time, the careful daily observations that translated into individualized learning pathways. She began staying late, asking questions, observing classrooms instead of walking past them. 6 months into her role, we hosted a staff appreciation luncheon. She approached me near the buffet, awkwardly holding a plate of pasta salad. I didn't understand before she said, barely audible, "It's not just watching kids. It's a real system. Complex. Important." I didn't respond right away, but I nodded. Thank you for saying that. Over the next year, my mother moved into an administrative coordinator position not because of her resume, but because she showed real commitment. She learned, adapted, listened. When we expanded to our 7th and 8th centers, she handled compliance reports like a pro, not with arrogance, but with respect for the framework she once belittled. Meanwhile, Bright Art kept growing. Our teacher training model got featured in national education journals. I gave keynote addresses at conferences, and the National Childcare Association awarded us their Top Innovation in Early Education prize. With stable revenue, we launched the Bright Art Foundation, a scholarship program to help low-income early educators earn advanced credentials. We partnered with universities, broke barriers, and grew a movement. And then came the dinner I never thought would happen. Just me and my mother, no holidays, no obligations. She sipped her wine, then set it down slowly. "I was wrong," she said, not looking at me. "I equated salary with value, prestige with importance. But the work you do, it shapes futures, in ways the courtroom never could." I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't cry. "Thank you," I said softly. Because I no longer needed her apology, but I had earned it. As I approached my 33rd birthday, a new kind of decision loomed, not a question of survival, but of scale. Bright Art had grown beyond my wildest dreams. 5 thriving centers in Boston and beyond, a training model replicated by others, a reputation for innovation and measurable impact, a staff of over 70 educators, a company valuation now exceeding $2 million, but the wait lists were longer than ever. Parents in other states began calling. Former students' families moved and begged for us to open a location closer to their new homes. It was time to franchise, not for money, but for mission. If we could teach others how to replicate our integrated curriculum-trained educators in our whole child, whole future philosophy and keep quality intact, we could create something bigger than just Bright Art. We could change early childhood education, nationwide. So I did what I always do when a new chapter calls. I went back to the blueprint, built a franchise model from the inside out, hired compliance specialists, wrote training manuals, rebuilt our parent engagement systems for scalability. I turned Bright Art from a passion project into a movement. In the first 6 months, 3 franchise applications were approved. The first opened in Austin, Texas, the second in Madison, Wisconsin, the third appropriately right outside Harvard Square, just blocks from where my parents once told me I was throwing away my intelligence. I walked past that corner one day and paused to watch parents drop off their children at a freshly painted Victorian. One little girl in pigtails turned to her mother and said, "I love this school. It feels like my brain gets hugged." I smiled so hard I thought my face would crack. Back at headquarters, my mother, now fully transitioned into an administrative training coordinator, was working quietly reviewing orientation documents for new franchise teams. She no longer sought titles, no longer clung to control. She showed up, she listened, she learned. And while our relationship wasn't perfect, it had become something neither of us had ever expected: honest, respectful, real. One rainy afternoon, I walked her through a slide deck for a new licensing agreement. She paused midway through staring at the projected revenue chart. "I used to think the only value was in courtrooms and contracts," she said. "Now I see it in things like that." She pointed to a feedback form from a parent who wrote, "My son used to cry before school. Now he asks to go early. You gave me my mornings back and him his confidence." That, she said, is real power. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I had heard everything I'd waited to hear, not in a speech, but in quiet understanding. In the months that followed, Bright Art launched 4 more locations, brought on educational fellows from Ivy League research centers, and began partnerships with local school districts to create better preschool pipelines. But even with all the expansion, I never stopped doing what mattered most. I still spent time in classrooms, still sat on floors beside children building block towers or sorting feelings cards, still greeted teachers by name, still remembered that none of this existed without them. I wasn't chasing headlines. I was building a legacy, and not one written in bank accounts or boardrooms, but in every child who walked into our centers and left feeling seen. And here's the truth I've come to realize. Sometimes the passion others mock becomes your greatest strength. Sometimes the path they discourage leads to your most meaningful success. And sometimes the people who couldn't see your value eventually do, but only after you've stopped needing them to. I used to think approval was the finish line, but now I know. The real victory is building something so meaningful it can stand even when no one is clapping. Have you ever been dismissed for following your passion, or told your dream wasn't enough only to prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And if Sarah's journey moved, you please subscribe, and stay tuned for more real stories of strength born from dismissal. Because sometimes the people who tell you it's just babysitting have no idea they're speaking to the next industry pioneer.